siblings vanished on a road trip in 1991. A car matching theirs was found in a lake in 2021, with no bodies. The Carson siblings, Riley and Danielle, were halfway through a road trip across the Southwest, driving a teal 1988 Chevrolet Cavalier their dad had bought used for $1,600. It wasn't flashy, but it ran fine. They had 3 weeks off, a stack of mixed cassette tapes, and a trunk full of gas station snacks and camping gear. Riley was 21, freshly out of college and all shoulders and sarcasm. Danielle was 19, sharp-eyed and more grounded than her older brother. The two had always been close, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse in Waco. Their father had died in a workplace accident when Riley was in middle school. They didn't talk about that much. Their plan was to hit a few national parks, camp along the way, and make it to California before looping back. It was the kind of trip young people romanticized: freedom, distance, open roads. But something shifted when they crossed into New Mexico. The gas station clerk in Tucumcari had eyed them too long. A man in a blue windbreaker stood behind their car while they pumped gas, not saying a word. When they drove off, Riley saw him watching from the side mirror. "You saw that guy, right?" he said, lighting a cigarette. "Just standing there like a creep." Danielle pulled her sunglasses down slightly. "Yeah, he followed us into the bathroom aisle before that. They didn't think too much of it then." The next stop was Santa Rosa, where they checked into a roadside motel called the Driftwood Inn. It was run down but clean, and the woman behind the desk told them the area had great lake views. The plan was to drive past Blue Hole the next morning, maybe stop for a swim. But that night, while Riley sat on the curb smoking a cigarette, a red Ford pickup rolled slowly through the motel lot. It passed twice, no headlights, windows tinted. He squinted through the dusk, but couldn't make out who was inside. He flicked the cigarette away and locked the motel door behind him. They left early the next morning, ignoring the motel's complimentary donuts and coffee. Riley drove with one hand on the wheel, the other on his Colt .45 under the seat. Their dad had taught them to shoot when they were kids, mainly for safety, maybe a little for peace of mind. By the time they hit Highway 91, a silver Buick had been behind them for over 30 miles. "That's not normal," Danielle said, twisting in her seat to glance back. "Should I stop?" Riley asked. "No. Speed up. Take the next exit." They veered off into a small town that wasn't even marked on their AAA paper map. It had maybe 4 buildings and a boarded-up diner. The Buick didn't follow, but Riley didn't feel any relief. They parked behind a crumbling fire station, grabbed their small backpacks, and ducked into an alley behind a laundromat. "I don't like this," Danielle said, her voice low. "We're being hunted," Riley muttered, pulling his shirt up to dab sweat off his face. "We need to stay low," Danielle nodded, her eyes scanning the empty street. "Let's ditch the car. If they're tracking us, it's probably tagged or something." "Seriously? Riley, someone is following us in a damn Buick with no plates. What would you call it?" He sighed. "Fine, we hide it and hike out of here." They drove the Cavalier off the main road and followed a dusty service path to what looked like a dried-up riverbed. After covering the car with a brown tarp and branches, they loaded their essentials into 2 canvas packs and began hiking west. Danielle insisted on staying near tree cover, and Riley kept the Colt tucked into the waistband of his jeans. It was hot and dry. Their canteens emptied quickly. But by sunset, they reached an old cabin, abandoned, but intact. It was just one room, dusty and filled with cobwebs. There was a rusted rifle above the fireplace, but no signs of life. They slept in shifts. In the early hours of the morning, a gunshot ripped through the stillness. Danielle hit the floor. Riley was already crouched near the window, pistol drawn. A bullet had pierced the side of the cabin. Dust swirled in the slanting moonlight. 2 of them, Riley whispered, outside near the trees. "Why are they after us?" Danielle whispered back. "I don't know, but they're not here to talk." Another shot hit the cabin. Wood splintered. Riley fired back twice. A scream echoed through the trees, but it was brief. Then silence. "I think I hit one," he said. Danielle stayed down. Her breathing was shallow. They didn't wait. At first light, they were gone, moving north this time, toward a train line they'd seen on the map. Their plan was to find a freight train and hop it old school. It was stupid and dangerous, but less dangerous than staying in the open. Midday they found the tracks, and another surprise. A man was waiting there, crouched by the rails. He had a radio clipped to his belt, wore hiking boots and a flannel shirt, and had a scoped rifle resting on his lap. He saw them and didn't even flinch. "You Carson kids?" he asked. They stopped. "Who's asking?" Riley replied. "Your mama sent me. Name's Grady. I used to know your dad. You got someone on your tail. Bad people, real bad." Danielle stepped forward. "Why us?" Grady stood up slowly, slinging the rifle over his shoulder. "Because of something your daddy had. Something he took before he died. You kids, you inherited more than just his name." Riley and Danielle exchanged a long, nervous glance. Then, far down the tracks, the sound of a truck engine shattered the silence. "They found us," Riley muttered. Grady pulled his rifle down. "Then let's make 'em regret it." Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Grady's rifle cracked before the truck even came into full view. A puff of dust burst near the front tire, forcing the driver to swerve and slam the brakes. Riley grabbed Danielle by the wrist and pulled her into the brush along the tracks. Grady followed, walking backward with his weapon up, calm like a man who'd done this kind of thing before. "Don't stop unless I tell you," he barked. The truck doors opened. Two men jumped out, both armed, both scanning for movement. One wore a tan vest, the other had a shaved head and mirrored sunglasses. They didn't yell, just moved forward with purpose, rifles low and steady. "They're trained," Grady muttered. "Mercs, maybe, hired guns. Why the hell would anyone send mercenaries after us?" Riley hissed. Grady didn't answer. They moved for an hour along the tracks, deeper into the woods, until they reached an old water tower. Grady signaled them to stop. He climbed up the rusty ladder with surprising ease for a man his age, then scanned the tree line. "They're sweeping in a pattern, like they've done this before. You two keep heading west. There's a ranger station about 10 miles from here, past the ridge. Go through the creek bed. Stay low. I'll draw them off." "No way," Riley said. "We're not splitting up." Grady looked him in the eye. "Your job is to keep your sister alive. Mine is to finish what your father started." Danielle reached into her backpack and handed Grady a small photo. Her and Riley as kids, with their dad in the middle, smiling wide, arm around each of them. "Bring it back," she said softly. Grady smiled and tucked it into his shirt pocket. "You got it." They didn't say goodbye, just moved. Grady fired twice more a few minutes later, each shot echoing through the trees, drawing attention away from them. By dusk, the Carsons reached the creek bed. The water was shallow and warm, and it masked their tracks. Riley spotted a crowbar half buried in the mud, rusted but solid. He handed it to Danielle. "Use this if you need to." She nodded, gripping it tight. They reached the ranger station after dark. It was locked and empty, but Riley kicked the door in. Inside, there were maps, a landline, and a cabinet with basic supplies. No radio, no guns. The phone had no dial tone. Useless. They locked the doors and waited. The next morning, a helicopter buzzed overhead. Danielle peeked through the slats of a boarded window. "They're still looking." "They won't stop," Riley said. "Not until we're dead." That night, the mercenaries found the station. The first sign was the crunch of gravel under boots. Then came the whispered voices. Riley yanked Danielle into the storage room. He held his pistol, breathing slow. She gripped the crowbar with white knuckles. The front door burst open. Flashlights swept across the room. One of the men spoke. "They're here." Riley took a deep breath and fired once through the wall. A shout followed. Boots scrambled. Someone returned fire. Splinters flew. Danielle ducked behind a cabinet. Riley knelt and reloaded, counting shots in his head. The firefight was short and loud. When it ended, one man was bleeding out on the floor, groaning. The other had disappeared. Riley searched the body. No ID, no phone, just a folded paper map with an X marked near an old storage facility west of Albuquerque. "What's this?" Danielle asked. Riley stared at the map. A lead. Maybe answers. They burned the body. Hid the evidence. Left before sunrise. 3 days later, sunburned, sore, and nearly out of water, they found the facility. It was tucked into a dry hillside behind a rusted gate and overgrown shrubs. A faded sign read Red Rock Cold Storage S 1973. The front door was chained, but Riley found a side window half broken. Inside, the air was cooler, thick with the smell of mildew and old chemicals. There were rows of broken freezers, overturned shelves, and a locked door at the far end. Danielle held the flashlight while Riley worked the lock with a screwdriver and the crowbar. It took 10 minutes, but it finally snapped. The door creaked open. Inside was a room filled with boxes, dozens of them, stacked ceiling high, each labeled with dates, initials, and hand-drawn markings. In the center was a desk with files scattered across it. Old documents, blueprints, diagrams of something mechanical. "What is this?" Danielle whispered. Riley rifled through the papers. Some were receipts for shipments dated back to the 80s. Others looked like transaction logs, money transfers, serial numbers, coded notes. But one manila envelope stood out. It had their father's name on it, Thomas Carson. Riley opened it. Inside were Polaroids of a man lying face down in a warehouse. Blood pooled around him. Another photo showed a younger Riley and Danielle playing in a yard, taken from a distance. Danielle covered her mouth. "Our dad didn't die in a work accident," Riley muttered. There was also a tape, old VHS, and a note written in block letters, "Property must never leave facility. Destroy if discovered." "We need to get this to someone," Danielle said. "News cops, someone. Who can we trust?" Riley asked. Before she could answer, the sound of tires crunching gravel froze them both. Riley grabbed the files and stuffed them into his bag. "Hide." They ducked into one of the freezer units, silent and tense. 2 men entered. Boots echoed off concrete. They spoke in low voices. "They were here. Smell the dust. Doors fresh broken. Can't be more than an hour ago. Orders? Kill. Burn everything." Riley clicked off the flashlight. They waited, breath held, as one of the men stopped just feet from their hiding spot. Then came the sound of a lighter sparking, the hiss of liquid. A match, Riley swore under his breath. "They're torching it." "We have to go," Danielle whispered. They bolted. The back door was chained, but Riley didn't stop running. He aimed and shot the lock. It broke on the third try. Flames had already started licking up the boxes behind them. They made it out just as the entire facility burst into flame. From the ridge above, they watched it burn. Danielle clutched her brother's arm. "Why us?" Riley looked down at the photo of their dad. "We're not just running anymore. We're finding out the truth, every piece of it." 12-year-old Caleb Carson had never met his Aunt Danielle. His father, Riley, rarely spoke about her or the chaos they had once lived through. Their past was a shadow behind his father's eyes, one Caleb could never reach. But that changed the day he found the lockbox. It was hidden behind a false panel in the attic, buried under old insulation and dust. Caleb had only gone up there because he heard something scurrying around, maybe a raccoon. Instead, he discovered a rusted metal box with a 6-digit combination lock, the kind you didn't stumble across by accident. He waited until his father left for work and then dragged the box to the basement. After 3 hours of guessing combinations and a YouTube tutorial on bypassing basic locks, he popped it open. Inside were papers, old ones, faded, yellowed with time. Some were stained with smoke or maybe blood. There was a flash drive taped to the underside of the lid, along with a note written in sharp all caps. "If I'm gone, do not trust anyone. Get this to Michael Garrison in St. Louis. Do not use email, do not talk, just go." Our Caleb's heart raced. He plugged the flash drive into his school laptop and opened the only folder it contained, Blackwater logs. There were recordings, some audio, some video clips. A few were transcripts. All of them mentioned the same things: money laundering, illegal transport shipments, and surveillance footage from a cold storage facility that had supposedly burned down years ago. But one video stood out. It was grainy, timestamped 1992. The angle was tilted, but Caleb could see 2 people, one holding a gun, the other clutching a folder. In the background, flames danced along the wall. Just before the camera glitched out, the guy holding the folder looked straight into the lens. It was his dad. Caleb leaned back, stunned. That evening when his father came home, Caleb confronted him. Not with anger, just the kind of stubborn curiosity only a teenager could have. You never told me what happened to Aunt Danielle." Riley's expression turned cold. He dropped his keys on the counter and poured a glass of water, taking his time. "She died." Caleb didn't blink. "You said she disappeared." "I lied." Riley looked tired, like the weight of old decisions had finally cracked through the wall he'd built. "She was killed in 1995. She tried to expose the people who came after us. I told her to stay out, but she wouldn't. Got too close, too loud." "By who?" Riley exhaled through his nose. "I don't even know what name they go by anymore. Back then, it was Blackwater Systems. Front for a logistics company, transporting cash, drugs, weapons under the radar. Real polished, top-tier stuff. They bought cops, lawyers, whoever they needed. We found out by accident. Our dad didn't just stumble onto them. He was part of their inventory management. When he figured out what they were really moving, they killed him. Made it look clean." Caleb felt his chest tighten. "Why keep all this? Why not destroy it?" "Because someone needs to finish what we started." "But not you." Caleb stared at him. "It's too late." That night, while Riley slept, Caleb packed a bag and took the flash drive. He left a note that simply said, "I have to know the truth. I'll be careful." He boarded a Greyhound to St. Louis the next morning. He had no idea who Michael Garrison was. All he had was a name, a city, and the belief that someone out there still cared enough to listen. After 2 days of asking around and getting nowhere, Caleb tried one last trick. He printed fake business cards with the name Michael Garrison, Data Consultant, and left them in a dozen coffee shops, each with a contact number linked to a burner phone. He got a call at 2 a.m. The voice was old, raspy. "Where did you get this name?" Caleb hesitated. "From Riley Carson." Silence. "Where are you?" They met in an abandoned parking lot near a freight yard. Garrison looked like a man who hadn't slept in a decade, gray beard, hollow cheeks, eyes that never stopped scanning. "Show me the drive," he said. Caleb handed it over. Garrison plugged it into a rugged laptop and began scanning files. As he read, his expression grew darker. "I told him to burn this, all of it. This is a death sentence. My dad said you could help." Garrison shook his head. "I'm not a hero, kid." "Then why are you still looking over your shoulder?" Garrison didn't answer, but he did give Caleb an address before he left. "There's a storage unit in Missouri. Number 178. It holds backups, photos, names, bank transfers. If you want to finish this, that's your next stop, but you'll need backup. This time, they'll know you're coming." Caleb returned home 3 days later to find the front door of his house kicked in and police tape across the porch. A neighbor said there was a break-in. No survivors. Caleb didn't cry. He ran for years. He changed names, moved states, always stayed mobile. By 2015, he had pieced together enough to know how deep the operation went, into politics, corporations, even tech startups. They had rebranded a dozen times, but the money never stopped flowing, and anyone who came close to exposing them disappeared. In late 2019, Caleb finally returned to Missouri. He found the storage unit, paid the back rent in cash, and opened it just before dawn. Inside were crates of files, surveillance equipment, and a small black duffel bag. Inside the bag, a pistol, a burner phone, and a photo of a red Honda Civic, identical to the one his aunt and father drove in 1991, submerged in a lake, barely visible beneath the green surface. The photo was dated 2021, and a note written on the back read, "Car matched. No bodies, no plates. This isn't over." Caleb stood on the shore of Echo Lake with the wind tearing across the water like a warning. It was early spring and the trees were still bare, casting long, twisted shadows behind him. His boots sank slightly into the muddy bank as he stepped closer to the edge, staring at the still surface that had swallowed his family's truth 3 decades ago. Behind him, parked discreetly under a patch of scrub trees, was an old black truck. Inside the glove box were copies of every document he had collected over the years, photos, reports, even that grainy video of his father and aunt during their final moments before everything unraveled. He checked his watch. The diver was late. Caleb had found him through an old contact of Garrison's, a man named Boone, ex-military, now working off the grid. Boone was the kind of guy who didn't ask questions unless he absolutely had to, and Caleb had paid him in cash, just like the man insisted. At 6:47 a.m., Boone's SUV finally rolled up. He stepped out, tall and wiry, in a worn camo wetsuit half-zipped and dragging a steel oxygen tank from the back. Without a word, he nodded toward the lake. "You sure it's here?" Boone asked, voice low and gruff. Caleb handed him the photo again. The drone image picked up something metallic under the surface. Right shape, right size. Boone looked it over and then at the lake. Depth, 22 feet, maybe more. Boone clipped on his gear and walked straight into the water. While he disappeared beneath the ripples, Caleb paced. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone had followed him. Maybe it was paranoia after all these years, or maybe it was instinct. His father always said, "If you ever feel like you're being watched, you probably are." 25 minutes passed. Then Boone's head finally popped above the surface, followed by the rest of his body as he waded out of the water, removing his goggles. "It's there," he said, shaking the cold from his shoulders. Red Civic, front bumpers busted in, windows shattered, doors locked, no sign of bones or clothes inside. "Clean? License plate?" Caleb asked. Boone held up a half-broken tag, the rust almost eating through the numbers. Caleb stared. It was a partial match. DNC4 was still visible. His chest tightened. That was Danielle's car. Boone handed him something else. A silver keychain, still faintly engraved with the letter C. Caleb's fingers trembled as he took it. Then he saw the boat. Far across the lake, slicing silently across the glassy surface, a dark aluminum boat was headed their way. Boone noticed too. "We gotta move," he said, dropping his tank and pulling a pistol from the waterproof bag. "That's not fishermen." Caleb grabbed his bag from the truck, heart pounding. "How many?" "3," Boone said, already crouching behind a boulder near the waterline. "And I'd bet my left eye they're not here to fish." The boat stopped a few yards from shore. 3 men stepped off, black jackets, tactical boots. Their posture was too clean, military or ex-military. The leader had a scar across his left eye and spoke into a radio without taking his gaze off the shoreline. Boone didn't wait, he fired first. The shot hit one of the men square in the shoulder, dropping him instantly. The others scattered and opened fire. Caleb hit the ground, crawling behind the truck, bullets tearing through the side panel like paper. His ears rang with every shot. Boone kept moving, staying low, returning fire in controlled bursts. He was efficient, fast, calculated. He'd clearly done this before. The other 2 attackers tried to flank him, but Boone circled right, dropped one with a shot to the thigh, then another as the third tried to climb back into the boat. The silence afterward was deafening. Boone lowered his weapon, breathing hard. Caleb stood up slowly, hands shaking. "They followed me." Boone nodded, wiping blood from a scrape on his forehead. "And they weren't just here to warn you. They came to erase you. Why now? Why 30 years later?" Boone glanced toward the lake. "Because you stirred up the mud. Whatever you found in that storage unit, it scared them." Caleb stared at the sinking boat, his mind racing. "I need to get this out, all of it. People need to see what they did." Boone looked at him grimly. "You can't upload this to some blog. These people have reach. You leak it wrong, it'll vanish. So will you. I'm not hiding anymore." Boone thought for a moment, then handed Caleb a card. It was blank except for a number scratched on the back. "Guy in Chicago. He's off-grid, good with data dumps. If anyone can publish this in a way they can't stop, it's him." Caleb nodded, jaw clenched. They buried the bodies deep in the woods nearby. Caleb snapped a few photos of their gear, their faces, and the serial numbers on their weapons. Everything went into the same duffel. As they drove away from the lake, Caleb looked out the window one last time. That lake had held a secret for 30 years. Not just about a car, not just about his family, but about a chain of events so deeply buried, someone had been willing to kill to keep it quiet, even now. In Chicago, 2 weeks later, the files were uploaded to 3 separate servers. 2 days after that, a national journalist received a package at his doorstep, no return address. Inside was a drive with everything Caleb had compiled. Blackwater systems, the dead agents, the sunken Civic, the trail of names stretching back to the 1980s. It took 1 week for the story to break, but the true cost? That came later, because the people responsible weren't all dead, and they weren't done yet. If you like this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for a part 2 of this story. Also, another to strengthen our community, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.